So I thought I would make a video, being as how the minimum wage is now becoming a conversation again, particularly because of the discussion that it may be raised finally to $15 an hour. Um, and I've found that generally the best way to solve this issue as far as to people not understanding it is to share with them the actual text of the law that established the minimum wage. And in this case, we're referring to the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. Now, the reason that I felt compelled to look for this law is because people continually suggest this idea that minimum wage jobs are meant for teenagers to learn job skills or teenagers to get gas money, and that minimum wage jobs were never meant to be a career. But that's not why the minimum wage was established at all. The minimum wage was established to maintain a minimum state, of decency, essentially, in somebody's lifestyle. So, to confirm that, let me go over this. The Congress finds that the existence in industries engaged in commerce or in the production of goods for commerce of labor conditions detrimental to the maintenance of the minimum standard of living necessary for health, efficiency, and general well-being of workers. So let's look at this last part again. Labor conditions detrimental to the maintenance of the minimum standard of living necessary for health, efficiency, and the general well-being of workers. So, not gas money, not teenagers get to learn how to have work skills, not teenagers learn how to maintain a job, not teenagers learn how to earn enough money to buy video games. A minimum standard of living necessary for health, efficiency, and the general well-being of workers. Period. Now, if you read the rest of it, it kind of explains that, that there are all kinds of other problems when the wage is not high enough. And essentially, it was proved to be clear during the course of the Great Depression that employers were not just going to voluntarily pay their workers more. There always seems to be a race to the bottom. And you see this right now, which is why, for example, so many of these wealthy employers choose to move their businesses to places where people don't have things like the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, where you can essentially offer a population a lifestyle similar to that of a plantation slave, which is what many of the people who live in these countries where the jobs are outsourced to live. The idea was always just to, because when you think about it, employment has an inelastic demand. You can say, okay, well, you can just go get a job somewhere else. The problem is that especially I saw it when I worked in minimum wage jobs during the course of the last recession, they figure out pretty quick that they have their boot on your throat and they treat you accordingly. So the reality is this: that minimum wage was created, whether you agree with it or not, to help people maintain a minimum standard of living necessary for health, efficiency, and general well-being of workers. Period. It doesn't, you may still disagree with the idea of the minimum wage, but please stop fostering this notion that it was established to give teenagers gas money, because that's just nonsense. It never meant that. And the circumstances to which it was written were meant to respond to a situation where people were literally just all over the streets. Now, there's a couple of other issues that come up when you're discussing the minimum wage. And frequently when I would debate the free market libertarian types about this topic is that they said that wages will increase with productivity. They act about that topic as if it's like a law of physics, as if automatically wages will go up with productivity. And the minimum wage itself was raised with productivity until sometime in the late 60s when, as you can see here, this is the minimum wage as compared to productivity, and this is productivity. This is when all of a sudden the rhetoric of suggesting that the minimum wage is not actually meant to be a living wage started to become more popular. And it basically depends entirely on people being ignorant of the truth. But employers don't just automatically increase wages with productivity. And Mises Institute types will tell you that they do, but this is just demonstrably untrue. If this were the case, why are they outsourcing to countries where they can pay people 50 cents an hour if they were just automatically going to raise productivity with, raise wages with productivity? If that was their interest, if that was their propensity, then they would have no motive to disappear off to countries where they can give people wages that they're willing to accept because it's better than starving to death. It's just silly. It just doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't reflect reality. Another important facet to understanding this issue is that the minimum wage was intended to be adjusted for inflation, and if it were, it would be more like $24 an hour. So even $15 an hour, people are getting off easy, essentially. So we can either raise the minimum wage, or we could do as Andrew Yang proposed, which is introduce a universal basic income, and then you could do away with the minimum wage, because at that point, the wage would be basically what people earned on top of what they need to survive. But that's a different argument for a different video. The main crux of this issue is this. Yes, the minimum wage was meant to be a living wage. And people talk about how all the prices go up if you raise the minimum wage, but as you can see, the minimum wage hasn't been raised for quite a long time, and the price of living went up on its own anyway. And that's because the price of living goes up because corporations, more or less just kind of to figure out, slowly but surely, how much they can raise the price of everything and still get away with selling it. That's actually how this whole supply and demand thing actually ends up working in reality. How much can I get away with selling it for? And so they'll just gradually increase the prices. Without a minimum wage hike, for some reason, all the fast food restaurants, for example, are still charging more for the burgers in question than they were when the minimum wage was established at $7.25. So the suggestion that the minimum wage alone is the reason why prices go up is just silly. And what people don't really seem to look at is the end game of the situation, which is that, okay, we eventually have to get to a point where we have to do something, because when the cost of living goes up so high that people can't survive, what are they supposed to do? And the suggestions usually are that, well, go get an education, translated go into student debt, which you usually can't pay. And frequently, even if it's a job that, would actually pay you well, you don't always find one. In fact, my employer at the last restaurant I worked at still has a criminal justice degree that she's paying off, and it turned out that she makes more money working as a store restaurant manager than she did in criminal justice. And she's still paying for the loan. So, there's also the possibility of starting your own business. The problem is, basically, I believe what they said the statistic was that 1 out of 4 small business owners succeeds, and the rest just fail and end up on the bottom. When I was at Occupy Detroit, and I was basically taking interviews to kind of get an idea of the demographic of the kind of people that were there, I ran into an awful lot of former blue-collar conservatives who had been left behind by the economy during the recession. And to those of you on the left, don't forget, Occupy happened during the Obama administration, so don't think that you're necessarily going to be better off just because you got Biden elected. So, anyway, I may talk about this topic a little more later, but in the end, my primary objective was not really to debate the merits of yay or nay, insomuch as to settle this one flagrantly wrong issue, which was to suggest that the minimum wage was just established to give kids the opportunity to earn money for gas money, or whatever other version of it. I also don't really understand that argument. Why would kids deserve to be paid less just by virtue of being kids? Are their teenage years for some reason less valuable to them than the adult years. Like it just doesn't make any sense. There's no reason why a teenager doing the same job as an adult shouldn't be able to get paid a competitive wage. Period. But with that aside, yes, it was meant to be a livable wage. Thanks for listening.